And we're live.
And it's slowly filling up. Hello, everyone.
I'm not sure that slowly. It goes pretty fast.
Okay. Granted.
Somebody's saying good morning. I guess
yes,
that would be
good morning, Ashley.
while people they are slowly logging in. Maybe you could use the chat and mention where you're from, and we have an idea what time zone we're working with, or time zones. Germany, UK, Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas.
Yeah, I saw that one. Okay, now it goes too fast.
Oh, sorry, Manchester there. Hello from Manchester.
Thomas
Sweet.
going past there from Gothenburg.
Nice.
It's a couple of names I recognize from trainings.
Aarhus, Denmark. Welcome. Wales. And Paulo, Brian was my SBC instructor in 2020. That's one of yours, Brian.
There's a couple in there, including you, remember.
I know, but it's a little bit longer ago than 2020, though.
It was, yes.
It was back in the days where we were actually still face-to-face, or in the same room at least.
Oh, Hal, just rolling through there.
Hi, Louise.
Oh, and Anand from Visa. Nice to see you again. Oh, here. I can't see you, actually. San Antonio. And How. Hey, How. Lovely. So the influx of people, I was just about to say it stopped, but it didn't. Up to at least 120 now. So maybe, given that people got the 3 minutes, Bev, do you want to start it off or give it another minute?
Absolutely. You want me to do the welcomes? Let's pop to the next slide then, Brian. That would be great.
Ooh, here we go.
Excellent. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. But I think I need to say good morning and good evening because we have a truly global audience today, which is super exciting. So welcome to our webinar, and this webinar is sponsored by Scaled Agile and Ivar Jakobsen. My name's Beverly O'Connor. I work for Scaled Agile, and I am the Territory Account Director for the UK, Ireland and South Africa, which just means that I look after all of our lovely customers and business partners across those territories. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to the session today. Which, as the title suggests, aims to give you some practical advice from the field around aligning value. Now, I know how exciting that is because the amount of people that have joined this call, this is clearly something that's of interest to everyone. I just need to point out that the session is being recorded. It will be available to be watched on demand afterwards, so please go back or recommend it to colleagues if you found it interesting today. The main thing about today is it's got to be interactive, right? We've got a lovely presentation from Brian, and afterwards we have a question and answer session, and we want your questions as they arise from Brian's pitch as we go through. And what we'd really like you to do is put your questions in the Zoom Q&A bit at the bottom, and then we'll collate those questions and we'll use them to facilitate our question and answer session at the end of Brian's pitch. You're already saying hello in the chat. That's fantastic. We love you to say hello and tell us where you're from and what company you're working from, because that just gives us an idea of how far a reach our community is, and it's about community. I think my next job really is just to introduce my two lovely panelists that I have on the call today. So a quick introduction to Rune Christensen. Rune is an SBCT and part of our EMEA consulting team. he is a fellow Danish. You probably heard him getting very excited when Danish people popped up earlier. So do give him a wave if you're from Denmark. Runa's an extremely experienced strategic advisor. He's got 20 years in the software business across various industries. Runa's role today is he's going to collate all of these lovely questions that you put in that Q&A session for us, and then he's going to facilitate the question and answer session with Brian at the end. So thanks, Runa, but get those questions in. I want him to be busy while this is going on. And then my last job is to introduce Brian Tucker. He's the main man today. He's the guy doing our bulk of our presentation. So Brian is a principal consultant, and he works for Ivy Jacobson, which is one of our most prestigious business partners. Brian is a fellow and he's an SPCT, and he was in fact one of the first trainers outside of Scaled Agile to become an SPCT. I think he's got the auspicious accolade of having delivered the program consultant training more than anybody else globally, I believe, which is one heck of an achievement. But, you know, alongside Brian's training engagements, he has been involved in multiple SAFe implementations across many different industries and customers. So, you know, you really have some experience in the session today. Please make sure you make the most of it. And I think that's a brilliant segue into me introducing Brian up to the stage to kick off our session.
Okay, thank you. So I've been asked by Scaled Agile to cover the topic of organising around value. And that's a mighty big topic to cover. Impossible to do justice to it in just one short soundbite. So it's ended up being 3 webinars. In the first webinar, this one today, we will be looking at aligning around value and the challenges that presents. In the next webinar on February the 14th, and flashing up on the chat now are the sign-up links for that one. We'll get practical and we'll look at patterns for development value streams. And we'll do that by exploring the value stream and art identification workshop. And finally, on February 28th, we will tackle funding and reporting, which is the flow of money and understanding whether it's been wisely spent. Now, I'm reckoning on about 30 minutes of me talking here and now, so that should leave plenty of time for questions at the end. As Bev has just mentioned, do use the question and answer tool because it allows Rune to collate the questions ready for later. Now, as always, I will caveat this presentation with it's my interpretation. You might interpret things differently, and you are quite at liberty to do so. Unfortunately, like so many things in this world, there is no right answer. If you want to go a different path, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. All I will do is ask, do the metrics show it's better than before? So follow your data, basically. So the question is, what is value? Well, value is very subjective. Different organizations will assess what's valuable to them differently. For many, it will be profits, but not all. A few years back, I was working with the British National Health Service, their blood and transplant division. Their measure of value was maximizing the number of people whose lives are improved when someone graciously donates blood or organs. The money to them wasn't important. They're just expected to have balanced the books by the end of the year. They're not in it for profit. It's a different value measure for them. You have to work out what's valuable in your context. What I will say is this: the value is already there and it's flowing. You already have operational value streams. You just need to uncover them and make them visible. Because value flows, and it flows like water. And just like water, value always finds a way to get through. Organizations find a way to get the value they want, despite the blocks that many organizations inadvertently put in front of themselves. Because if the value isn't flowing, then your organization is dead. So it's really a question of efficiency. How efficient is your organization at generating value? The more efficient you are at generating value, and the more rapidly you can reorganize how you generate value, should such an reorganization be required, then the more likely you are to survive. Always remember that survival isn't a given. You have to earn it. So why align around value? Well, I could talk here about SAFe Principle 10, one of our little cards, and organizing around value, and just recite the words from the training course about better communication, faster time to market, automatic alignment with the business. But I would rather try to illustrate it visually. Think of the images and the water in these images as value flowing through your organization. On the left, value is flowing. It's getting there, but it's got to work its way around all of the rocks. And those rocks are the processes that don't quite work right, the departments fighting each other. All that turbulence is the noise of managers in meetings arguing, the roar of people just trying to get stuff done, the thunder of work continually crashing up against blockages and having to navigate around. On the right, value is flowing unimpeded. The structures around it are supporting it to get to where it needs to be, smoothly, efficiently. Lean Agile ways of working aren't a magic bullet. They don't suddenly make the engineering staff faster or better. The engineers can become faster because the organization becomes more efficient. Less effort is being wasted on that turbulence. Aligning around value also gives the organization more control. Now, when I say control, I don't mean dictating to individual engineers what they are doing, the minutiae of their day-to-day work. I mean control over the organization as a holistic whole. The more turbulent an organization is, the more that you have to fight the system. And the more that you fight the system, the more likely you are to see the organization trying to cheat the system. Subcontract out, develop the system with off-the-books developers. The organization gets the value flowing through informal means, since the formal means aren't fit for purpose. Just do it in an Excel spreadsheet. Except you shouldn't, because you're a bank. Those cells in that spreadsheet are money, and all it takes is an accidental slip, and an extra zero here or there can mean big problems. The auditors don't like the fact that there's precious little in the way of audit trails to track who changed what and what went where. If you're aligned around value, you've got much greater control around getting things done right, because there won't be a need to cheat the system. I can push the water metaphor a little bit further as well. How consistently is value flowing? Is it flowing as a steady stream? Every day, week, or month, the organization gains value. A good example of steady flow would be consumer products continually being sold. Or is the value flow a flood surge? Everything at once and then nothing for ages. The example of a flood flow would be the once in a decade government contract. I certainly know which scenario I would prefer. The predictability of a steady flow of value is a lot easier to deal with. Turning flood surges into steady flow requires a lot of infrastructure. That has to happen because the consumption of value tends to be a steady flow. How is the value consumed? Well, it's the operating expenses of your company, the wages, the rent, the raw material costs, and they get paid out in a steady flow. So to manage a flood surge and turn it into a steady flow, in the physical world of dealing with water, it becomes dams, holding reservoirs. In the world of business, it falls to the accountants to have to put the money aside for use in the future. It's just a lot easier to match things when the flow in and the flow out are fairly consistent and similar. Okay, water metaphors over. Starting points for reorganization. It's not enough to know where you want to get to. We know that that's aligned around value, but to plot a sensible route to that destination, you also have to know where you're starting from. Now, there are obviously many different starting points, but there are some common themes around this as well. Either organizations weren't aligned around value in the first place, or the value that they were aligned around has changed. So let's examine those starting points. You don't have to align around value. You should, in order to get the benefits that come with aligning around value, but it doesn't have to be the first thing you do. It's not uncommon when transforming organizations, a group of people present themselves and they want to be more agile than they were, and they want to start running as an agile release train. As a coach, are you going to send them away saying, don't come back until you've organized around value? Or are you going to help them? Even if you're not aligned around value, the act of planning together collaboratively as a train and taking ownership of the tools and processes to get flow going, it's going to be better than the old world. The act of collaboratively planning together, well, that generates so much information that they can then feed into conversations about who needs to work with who, both across the teams, but also out towards the business. And it's those latter observations that can feed into alignment around value conversations, and the structures put in place now can be evolved to align around value over time. And they will need to continue evolving because value for our organizations typically changes over time. Which is the second scenario. We had been structured around some value, but that value has now changed. Organizations are not static. They are continually experimenting, trying new things to see if they are more valuable than what we are currently doing. If you want an example, Amazon. When Amazon first started out, almost 30 years ago, yeah, they've been going that long, almost 30 years ago, their primary revenue stream, how they generate value, it was selling books. And then within 2 years, they'd expanded that to CDs, DVDs, and other cuboid-shaped objects that could be easily boxed. But what is Amazon's primary value earner now? Amazon Web Services. It started out as the infrastructure team for the bookstore and the need to have a scalable infrastructure to cope with the demands of Black Friday and the holiday periods. Then somebody had the bright idea that we could sell this in its own right. That evolution in value hasn't just affected Amazon, it's caused others to evolve their value offerings as well. Microsoft with Azure, Google with Google Cloud, amongst others. The activities to align an organization around value aren't done once at the beginning of an agile transformation. You need to be revisiting them regularly, not sprint by sprint, annually perhaps. Maybe the decision, like Amazon's let's start selling the infrastructure, becomes the trigger for a revisit. And when you do revisit, it's easier than the first time around. You've already got the information from last time as a starting point, and the participants know what to expect and what to look for. So you've identified that there is a need to reorganize. Now you have to go on the journey of reorganizing, and that journey is never an easy journey. To change the culture, you have to change the organization. That's John Cotter. If you want to adopt a lean, agile culture, then the organization is going to have to change. It will be necessary to reorganize the people, to put new structures, new roles, new responsibilities in place. If you don't, then you won't see any change, other than maybe the adoption of a few agile buzzwords, because the old organization still persists. And just using agile buzzwords doesn't make you agile. But if we just tore up the old world and instigated a brave new world, then it will become the new hierarchy. Every revolution soon becomes the establishment and becomes fixed in place. The solution is not to trash what we know and start over, but instead to reintroduce a second system. That's Kotter again. This is where the dual hierarchy becomes useful. The dual hierarchy. It's that little bit in the first section of Leading Safe where everyone hears that Safe is forming the network. Very little is said about the hierarchy, and everyone moves swiftly on to the practical stuff in the competencies, the principles, and eventually the practice and processes to get work done. However, if you want to be agile, to be able to reorganize rapidly to meet future challenges, then the dual hierarchy is a very important piece of the business agility puzzle. Don't jump over it, try to understand it. The hierarchy is permanence, and it's there for things like line management, contracts, pay and rations, rewards and discipline, things which need stability and that degree of permanence. Do understand that it's not an either or. The workforce is in both the hierarchy and in the network at the same time. Hierarchy is dealing with the stable things like contracts and pay. Network for the transient things like, what are we working on today? When we adjust the network, there is no need to change the line management. There is no need to change the contracts or pay. It's just the people you're working with and the backlog you draw your work from. That may change. Reorganizing around value is about the setting up of the network of development value streams and making sure that network is aligned around delivering value. And if value changes, we adjust the network. What we will need to do as part of the reorganization is make sure that everyone understands their new responsibilities. In particular, line management is now solely concerned with the pastoral care of the workforce. They are not responsible for the flow of value that comes through the network. That responsibility lies with the roles within the network, which may be different from how things have historically been run. Do check that the individuals concerned want to be line managers, people persons. If they got into management to direct the work, then we need to remove their line management responsibilities and steer them towards one of the other safe roles, such as product management, system architect, or release train engineer, or perhaps their solution train equivalents if you're operating up at that scale, since it's those roles that have joint responsibility for the work. This is the instigation of new roles, new responsibilities, the changing of the organization. And it's the middle management level that undergoes the biggest change in any scaled agile transformation. It's not uncommon to meet some resistance to this. In my time, I've heard them referred to as the permafrost, the sticky middle, amongst many other, usually slightly derogatory names. I would sell it to them like this. Due to safe separation of responsibilities, work is separate from technical and architecture, which is separate from facilitation, which is separate from people and line management. Whatever you as a middle manager enjoy doing, we can get you more of it. And we will try to move the responsibilities of things you don't enjoy to someone that does enjoy doing them. Phrased that way, making their lives easier, hopefully there will be less resistance to change. Now, SAFE fellow Ian Spence discussed the dual operating system in a talk at the SAFE 2020 Summit. Video is available on the SAFE website. I'll drop links into chat, and they're also in the presenter's notes of this when the slides get distributed later on, if you want to know more about the dual operating system. When we talk about reorganization, everyone immediately thinks about the people, who's working with who, what they're working on. But allowing all of that to happen is the money. How you are funded and how you perceive the money to flow within the organization has a huge impact on how agile the organization can be. If you want to give yourself the best chance of business agility, then you've got to fund the flow of value, not the work. If you fund the work, then the money must be spent on doing that work. The people can't decide to go off and do something else. They've got to do the work that's been funded, even if the something else is potentially more valuable. But this then means we're doing something less valuable. That's never a good thing. That loss of freedom also limits the ability to be agile. It's stopping you from achieving the goal of lean as well, which is value in the sustainably shortest lead time, because you're not doing the most valuable thing. But changing the money can be hard. Why is that so hard? Because it's a people problem. It's mostly about authority. This is my money, you do what I say with it. When you take the money away, they lose their authority, their power. And agility, particularly at scale, comes from moving the authority for the decisions to where the knowledge is. That's SAFe Principle 9, decentralized decision making. Direct control gets replaced with intent, a vision for what the organization should be doing, and then empowering the teams to work out how to achieve that vision. Those people responsible for setting the vision, now they've had the money taken away, are going to have to argue each piece of work, each epic, each feature, justify its value for the organization as a whole, and they will be competing with each other for space on the release train backlogs. Their work might not get done. This will be frustrating for them, but it's because something else is more valuable to the organization as a whole. That frustration will be amplified if they've been incentivized to deliver their bit. They'll become selfish, competitive, and thus destroy the system, to quote W. Edwards Deming. You need to ensure they're incentivized around the success of the system as a whole, so that they are encouraged to collaborate. One can sacrifice their work for another for the benefit of the system as a whole, and they will be rewarded for that. Internal competition is madness. You're destroying yourself. You should be competing against your competitors. I think the clue might be in the words there. Now, this is also hard because if you're a team level agile coach, this all takes place several pay grades above your experience. If you want to coach up at this level, you need to learn their language, empathize with their worries and concerns. It is different to coaching engineers. It's not the empowerment problem that engineering teams face, which is the regaining of empowerment to be engineers again. Up at the top, they've got all the empowerment in the world. If they say, make it so, it will be done. What they need at the top is to be able to see the problems they are facing and how they can influence the new lean agile processes to solve those problems. Processes they probably have no prior knowledge of and will need guiding through. As coaches, we should never be doing their job for them. They have to decide on things for themselves. Our job is to steer them towards using those decisions to influence the lean agile processes and helping them interpret the information coming up from the lean agile processes to close the accountability loop and ensure the decisions they made did the right thing, that we are actually achieving the intent, the vision that was set out. So anti-patterns to organizing around value. There is only one anti-pattern, and that is not aligning around value. It really is that black or white. Either you're aligned or you're not. So to gain insight, we need to drill down at least one more level and ask, why as an organization aligned around value. And that's when more interesting information starts to emerge. Now, every scenario is going to be different, but again, there are common themes that regularly occur. These can be broadly grouped into internal factors that the development value stream has control over, and external factors that are beyond the development value stream. Now, the scenarios I'm outlining here, they aren't all encompassing. You might well encounter something beyond these themes. We'll look at internal factors first. Roles, responsibilities. We've touched on this one already. The roles and responsibilities need to be aligned with value, and the people need to adopt the right behaviors. Why aren't the people willing to adopt the new roles? Well, there is no magic fix for this. It's people change. It's listening to their concerns, demonstrating how the new system of working interacts with their concerns, and then guiding and coaching them to help them do what they need to do using the new system of working. Behavioral change is hard. It takes time, a lot of time, and a lot of support. Work. Work created for a different system of working doesn't always fit neatly with the new system of working. Sometimes you need to ignore sunk costs. All that time and effort involved in creating a massive work breakdown structure, let it go. For agile teams and trains to work effectively, the work needs to be problems to solve, not solutions to enact. It's the posing of problems that allows us to empower the teams and trains to self-organize to solve those problems. And it's through empowerment and self-organization that you start unlocking the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers. SAFe Principle 8. You're doing that in order to start realizing their full potential. Now, preparing good features is an art, pun not intended. It's a real skill, and there's not a lot written about it. The framework favors keeping it a very open topic, which means that organizations can evolve bad practices as much as they evolve good practices. Again, SAFe fellow and colleague Ian Spence has written about feature preparation on the Eva Jakobsen website. I'll drop a link into chat a little bit later on when I'm not talking. And there's a link in the presenter's notes once these slides are distributed. Moving across to the external factors. Sometimes the bigger organization doesn't care. A few years back, I was working with a group of just under 100 engineers located in the middle of a major investment bank of 100,000 staff. The tail can't wag the dog. If we demanded that the investment bank change its way of working in order to allow our 100 engineers to be agile, we'd have been thrown out of the building forcibly. Thankfully for us, though, the 100 engineers were given enough freedom that they could operate any way they wanted. So they set themselves up as an agile release train, working in a lean agile fashion, and aligned around improving the value of the solution that they were responsible for. They got quite good, award-winning even. Other parts of the bank took notice, and agility started to spread. There are still limits. Alignment across systems is hard. Analysis across systems to improve the true end-to-end flow is also hard. And it may be always hard because the bank might never change. But at least within their sphere of influence, they've made things better for themselves and their immediate customers. Finance. We've touched on finance as well. That investment bank I just mentioned, they are always going to be thinking in terms of projects. It's how they finance change within the bank, and that is unlikely to change in the immediate future. Thankfully for us, these were bank scale projects, significant sums of money, enough to fund a sizable fraction of a development value stream for a year. the train, the value stream, gets funding from 2 or 3 of these bank-scale projects alongside a block of funding to run the system. The sources of funding mean there are constraints. If you've put funding in, then you expect the train to be working on the sort of functionality you want rather than what they want to do. But even within those constraints, there is negotiation and choice. The key here is that the funding blocks are significant. They're big, and they are funding outcomes, which allows freedom in the work done to achieve those outcomes. If it were the work being funded, individual features, then that freedom is lost, and the benefits that come from freedom, autonomy, and self-organization, they are lost too. Internal compromises are tactical, short term. Ultimately, you're going to want to change, to do the right thing. And because the factors are internal, you can. Sometimes it's just the right thing takes time. The compromise is being made here and now so that we can start. And once we've started, we can start moving towards doing the right thing. With the external factors, the compromises may be more permanent, since we are not in control of the external factors. Keep an eye on the goal of lean, value in the sustainably shortest lead time. Hold your compromises up to that goal and minimize the deviation from that goal as much as possible. And always keep pushing for external change long term, and grab as much as you can, as much freedom as you can for your own development value stream, short term, so that you can control your own immediate internal destiny. So far in this little presentation, we've seen that organizations get the best chance of success if they are aligned around how they deliver value, and the organizational structures, processes, and decision-making is aligned to support the delivery of value. That isn't easy. It's a journey to get there because it takes time to change the structures and processes, because ultimately it is always a people problem. It requires convincing people that this new system of working will get better results, and showing them how they can influence the system of working to get what they're after without breaking our new system of working. So in the next session, we'll look at the SAFE value stream and art identification workshop. It's the practical process used to try to rearrange your organization around value. And buried at the heart of that is the simple statement: group the people into development value streams. Simple. No, not really. Because there's not a lot written down about it. There's not a lot of advice on how to put those groups together, who should work with who, and what logic drives those decisions. It really is a bit of a black art. So whilst each scenario is going to be unique, there are similarities, and given enough data, common patterns start to emerge. So next time we'll look at patterns for development value streams. Thank you for listening. I hope that was interesting. As always, feedback is gratefully appreciated so we can make things better for next time. I'm sure we've got plenty of questions, so I'll hand back to Rune to facilitate that, and here becomes my little torture. Let's see what's going to happen.
Thank you, Brian. That was mesmerizing as always. I'm just gonna to take the easy part. This is being recorded, of course, and we will share the recordings afterwards. Just taking the practicalities. I can see the questions already coming in, so I'm allowing myself to group them and combine them a little bit. So we have a question on whether we really need to shift away from traditional funding to a more dynamic way of doing it in order to be agile. And then I'll top that question off with if you have some tactical compromises you can make to move in that direction of more dynamic funding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of the opinion, and it might be slightly heretical, that projects, the traditional funding mechanics, aren't evil. They aren't necessarily a good fit for what we are trying to do, because we're trying to look after long-lived systems, and funding the changes to those long-lived systems doesn't make as much sense as funding the actual people that will keep that system running, which is what value streams do. But they're not intrinsically evil. The challenge is when you fund that work, then you are constrained to doing that work. And if something more important comes along, you either have to find more money to do it, which itself, even if you find more money, might not be realistic because you're actually still drawing from the same pool of engineers, or you have to try and get money back from the projects already in place, stop them and do something else. And that is almost impossible as well. So that logic of funding the work for what we need to do with our long-lived systems just doesn't make sense. It is great. Projects are great for one-off, truly one-off things. The pre-pandemic, when we could all fly, I was actually doing some work for a Middle Eastern airline. And we basically sat down and we looked at what was going on, and the questions were, is this a one-off change? And do we already know the answers? Is it a solved problem? And if it's a one-off change and a solved problem, run it as an old-fashioned stage-gated project. And the example there for this airline was the construction of a new terminal at their airport in the middle of the desert. Already designed, fixed in place. You've just got to pour the concrete, stack the blocks on top of each other, and job done. If it's a one-off change, but the answers aren't already known and you've got to do the problem solving, well, problem solving, that's agile territory. I'd run it as an agile project. The example of this is architecting, and I mean building architecture here, not software architecture, true construction style architecture. That is problem solving. And although the architect firm probably doesn't recognize all of the agile buzzwords we from the software engineering space use, if you peel it all back and look at what they do, they offer some designs up to the customer who looks at them and goes, make it more curvy. They take it back, they change the designs. There's an iterative process going on there, and that'll be extended out to their engineering consultants to know if it's actually is possible to construct it. And they keep going around these loops, which are our sprints, our iterations in any other terms. And we're running it in a very agile fashion because it helps us solve the problems. But it is a one-off. They are not going to build another airport for some 20 or 30 years. That's the lifespan of this. Next round. Their ticketing system.
Very nice.
I was going to say their ticketing system, they make changes to it all the time. They run that as a value stream. It's not a project, it's not a one-off, it's persistent value stream. And to close all of that, operations. Just keeping something running where you've already got the answers, there's no problem solving, you just got to keep it running. That is true ops, which is how they run the airfield. They know exactly what they've got to do. Load in the meals, refuel the aircraft, pure operations. So our world, problem solving and continual problem solving is where the value streams fit, which is most of software. Right, I think that's answered some of it. If it hasn't, drop another question in and Rune will pose another one to me shortly.
Absolutely. So questions are filling up. So I will apologize up front. We will not make all of them, but I'll surely try to fix some of the super interesting ones. So one of them is talking about, this is really back to Principle 9. What, Brian, in your experience, who's responsible to organize or reorganize around value? Who's allowed to do this?
So this is going to be very context specific, and it also depends on what sort of level we are talking. Ultimately, it's the organization itself has to want to reorganize around value, and it can then reorganize itself into development value streams. Then within those development value streams, they should be sizable chunks, at least a release train, possibly several release trains. So within that construct, they can reorganize themselves. If there's a changing balance of skills necessary within the development value streams, they should be empowered to change their teams, adjust, upskill themselves as necessary. Where it all starts to go wrong, and the anti-pattern here, is when development value streams get instigated too small, and when particularly portfolios get instigated too small. Then they don't have enough money, enough budget to change things without having to go and ask for more money. And they can't change things around. And obviously the funding is the slowest thing to change. Most people only change funding on an annual or semi-annual basis. And if you are moving money around, that's moving people around, which is potentially hiring and firing. If we're socially responsible, maybe we're moving people internally, but ultimately it could be hiring and firing. And we know that process is slow, really quite slow. So the bigger groups you can fund, the more that they can self-organize within. First rule of scaling is don't. You always want to be trying to solve the problems with a smaller group of people. But first rule of portfolio is bigger allows more self-organization within some degree of sensibility. If you're too big, then it falls apart again. There's a sweet spot in the middle. Enough? More?
Very nice, Brian.
So that try and empower everyone. Ultimately, the portfolio is your first, whatever you've decided your portfolio to be. But sometimes, as my investment bank example, there's a group of people just wanted to be more agile, and they had permission to do things how they wanted to. So within that, they were self-organizing. They could sort out their roles, responsibilities, and do what they can. They were never going to be perfectly aligned around value, but there is an argument you will never perfectly align yourself around value anyway, just because there is no right answer. But they could show they were better than before, and that's the important thing. They could prove through the metrics that they had they were better than the old way of working, and consistently getting better, because they had the agile loops of self-improvement, retrospectives and everything to continually improve beyond that. But yeah, taking ownership of your own process and tools is the first step to all of that.
Thank you, Brian. So I'm finding some really, really interesting questions here. This one is a particular interesting one. So talking back about the dual operating system, do you see this as going on forever, or maybe recommend that we just have a network operating system with product management POs on the long term as an evolution? What do you see here?
If you take the hierarchy away, then the network will end up becoming the new hierarchy, and it will get fixed in place, and you won't have that flexibility. It's remembering that these are two separate things, and they've got different concerns they need to deal with. The hierarchy, it's looking after the very stable things, the long-term things, and that typically is the operational value streams, they're long-term, and things like pay and contracts and stuff for our engineers within the development value streams. You don't want those changing. Well, I mean, you do. You all want a pay rise at the end of each year, but that happens slowly. What we do want to be able to change rapidly is who's working with who and their focus, and that's all of the network. So they will both exist in parallel forever. What we would like is to try and make the hierarchy, the bits of the hierarchy, more agile. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to be full-on Scrum teams. Some bits may be, but we want them to be more agile, more adaptable, so they can react quicker if necessary. But they're always there for the stability. It's there for that stability side of things. And again, Ian's video on the SAFE website goes into this a lot more detail. He actually ended up doing a second one at the 2021 summit. on almost the same topic, but that one's only accessible if you have access to the community forum. So I linked to the earlier one, which is publicly accessible, but feel free to go into that, look for Ian Spence in the set of videos in the community forum if you have access to that.
It is truly a good video. I've seen it a couple of times. So a little more guidance is asked here. Brian, could you maybe elaborate a little bit more? This is from one of the questions coming in. How do we identify these value streams? And maybe both speak to the operational and development ones. I tend to find grouping development value streams an interesting exercise, especially during the implementing class. How do we find them? How do we distinguish the different kinds we have?
Well, the development value streams, that's the topic of the next webinar in 2 weeks' time on the 14th. So come back for that one. Well, the operational value streams, however, they are already there. They're how your business runs, how it perceives it makes money, how it generates value. So it's really a case of uncovering those in order to start the process of who is supporting those development value streams. And some organizations have lots of operational value streams, some don't. They just have one or two. And it's not really a question of scale either. It's truly what your business does. If we look to something like a bank, they have lots of operational value streams. Credit cards, current accounts, loans and mortgages, similar sort of stuff for all corporates. And then in the back rooms, they've got all the black magic of how they do things on the markets, the foreign exchange, the derivatives and futures and whatever else, the trading they do back there. That's lots of ways that the bank perceives it makes money. And yeah, they're a big organization, as I said, 100,000. Look to a car manufacturer, one of the big automotive manufacturers. Again, 100,000, if not more employees, operational value streams for them, manufacturing and selling cars, supporting the cars that have been sold with spares and servicing. And I'm sort of running out after that point. It's a huge organization, and within those development value streams, there's lots of people, but actually those organizations just have a few value streams. So the number of value streams you've got is not related to size of your organization. But yeah, what does your organization do? What does it do? And some of these operational value streams are very stable. I have done some work for the Belastingdienst, which is the Dutch tax office. Operational value stream, taxing the Dutch population, so income tax. We reckon that was at least 400 years old. Only been computerized in the last 20 years, if that, but the actual operational value is ancient and very stable. The actual practices, processes, governments keep messing with the actual percentages all the time, but the act of taking somebody's income and then taking a percentage of money out of it to then reflect back to the population as a set of services to improve the population, that is, fairly stable. And then you look at more modern companies, the Amazons, the Googles, they are always trying to find new operational value streams, partly because it's their role as disruptor, although they are becoming the incumbents now and others are disrupting them, but they're still discovering where they can make their mark. Whereas not quite the same as the Belastingdienst, the tax office, those companies like the automotive manufacturers, the banks that have got 100, 150 years of experience behind them, I suspect most of their operational value streams are fairly stable now. They know what they're doing, and it's efficiency that is there to win the day.
Excellent. I think I have a question here that will fit nicely in, because you talked a lot about operational value streams going to customers, but there's a question here from Sultan about internal value streams or supporting value streams. What's your take on that? Do we need to map that out in the first place? Are they even important?
Yeah, well, first thing is always remember customer in a lean sense is just recipient of our work. So some of the things we do, yeah, might be for internal customers as much as it is truly external customers. My example in the bank, the system they were producing is a profit and loss reporting system. And that is for the benefit of the bank so that it knows exactly how much money they've got in the bank at any one point in time, so they can keep the regulators happy. And the quicker they know how much money they've got, the more that they are allowed to trade. Whereas if they don't know how much money they've got to keep more reserves, untraded reserves in place. And obviously they want to trade more so they can try and earn more profits. And yeah, end customers, the clients of the bank that want loans, mortgages, credit cards, and to do stuff like that, they will never see this system. It's entirely for use within the bank, and it's legitimate. They can actually show that they are helping the bank to be more profitable because the bank is then allowed to trade more through what they do. So internal value streams do truly occur. If you want something a lot closer to home, often it's things like tooling, infrastructure. They're a value stream, the development value stream that actually helps keep the other development value streams running, these sort of platform type teams, to use the team topologies type stuff. It may be that you are the internal value streams, they contribute to the organization's greater value. It's an indirect contribution, but you can still trace through that introduction to show that we are making the organization better, faster, more efficient. So the other parts that generate the true value for the organization, they can do it better, faster, more efficiently.
Very nice. So I think we have room for one quick question.
One, yeah, I think we could squeeze that in.
A little bit around the middle managers, the permafrost. I think you mentioned it. I like to call them the paralyzed middle. All the teams want them to get more responsibility, whereas the leadership on top, they want to force them to do other things. But do you have some good examples of this, or maybe some good ideas how to overcome this from the real life experience?
You've just got to start engaging with them and talking to them, and leading them through the process that this is going to change what they do. And this is, as I said in the presentation, this is where the change happens the most, because engineers still do engineering at the end of the day. Leaders still make decisions right at the very top at the end of the day. It's the middle management that historically were shouting and telling people what to do. That's where those behaviors have got to change. And it is behavioral change. So it's going to be sitting down with them, explaining to them, whether that be official teaching, classroom style, or workshops or whatever. Explain to them what the transition is going to be, and then help them find a place in the new system of working, in the new setup. And it's not like you can just say all of managers of type X become type Y in the SAFe system. You have to work with every individual, look at their skills and their aspirations, and then find a good fit within the SAFe framework. And because you're dealing with every individual, that is a lot of time and effort, but it's well worth doing. Because if you just force people into places, then you end up with problems. And help them understand how they can get what they need to do out of the system, and make sure they're not incentivized to do the wrong thing. I mean, that will derail things quite quickly. So unpicking some of the historic incentivizations and getting them lined up with the agile, lean agile ways of working is key.
Great. Thank you, Brian. I tend to think that we get quite far with empathy and trying to understand the situation they're in as well. I mean, they're part of the transformation too.
So a key part of it, yeah.
So that's the questions, Vinay. I mean, I have a bigger backlog of questions that I have answered once, but I mean, that's what we get. It was a pleasure being here, getting some of the questions across. Any last words, Brian, before we talk off?
Do try and align around value. It will make things easier eventually, and realize it's a journey. It might not be where you start, but it's a journey to get there. And even once you've got there, it keeps changing. So you've got to keep at it. You've got to keep continually reassess, are we as effective as we could be, and keep going. And come back in 2 weeks' time and we'll talk about some of the practicalities of how do you spot development value streams. So yeah, more useful stuff there.
Thanks a lot, Brian. A pleasure again, and looking forward to see what happens in 2 weeks' time.
See you all then.
See you.